Hello, I'm Sophie. This is a series of presentations about the Taubman-Galansky approach to strings. The presentations form a comprehensive series, but have also been designed to work alone, so they can be used in various ways. They address some of the fundamental principles of the approach and show how these principles can provide answers to some of the most commonly asked questions by players of all levels, from professionals to students. The information presented makes most sense when we feel it ourselves, combining knowledge and sensation. There is an immediately recognizable, clear physical logic to it. While these presentations are not a substitute for hands-on work, they can offer an entry point to this wonderful information. Bow arm fundamentals. First of all, we need to have a very clear understanding of the role that each part of the finger, hand, and forearm unit plays in the bow arm, and then how these interact to enable the bow arm to function with ease. It is a fundamental Taubman-Galansky principle that when each part does its share, according to what it is designed to do, no more and no less, then we can move with ease and comfort and power. Walking is a perfect example. When you walk, your toes, ankles, lower leg, knee are all doing their part. But if you try and walk without your toes doing their tiny toe-like share, then the entire walking process is compromised. Equally, if you try and lead from your toes and make them play a larger role than that for which they were designed, you cannot walk either. You can try both. Try walking without your toes moving, and you feel the entire leg becomes very stiff. Then try leading from the toes, and it feels very strange. It is so clearly not right, and we can immediately feel how other parts have to compensate, and the system doesn't work well. What was an easy thing to do, walking normally, becomes cumbersome and exhausting. You certainly couldn't run a race like that. So we have to really understand what each part does, and then how those parts interact as an integrated whole. When we think about the bow arm, we often confuse the concrete movements that the right arm has to make to produce magical sounds with experiencing those magical feelings ourselves. Feeling magical about the music and physically knowing how to produce magic through tone and timing are not the same. Knowledge of the specific concrete physical tools enables us to produce the sounds and colors we want. Just thinking what we want without the attachment to precise physical information can get us into much trouble. Anguished music doesn't require anguished hands and arms. It requires the knowledge of how to produce sounds that communicate anguish. So we have to start with the fundamental, concrete, physical information that can then be developed with further tools that enable us to produce the magic we want to express. So we're going to start with the holding mechanism. We have to hold the bow. That sounds obvious, but when the bow's activity is so connected to how we feel emotionally about the music, such a mundane activity as holding an object often becomes unnecessarily complex. Yet we hold objects all day, every day, without taking lessons and without any problems. The bow is in reality just another object, and therefore we need to hold it the same way we hold anything else for which we didn't need hours of practice. What we do with the bow after we are holding it is, of course, another story. If you hold a bottle, you can do this with me, we have all the ingredients of a bow hold. The first thing to notice is that all 5 fingers hold equally as a team. This includes the thumb. No one finger is dominant or assigned a specific isolated task. We don't feel the index finger more than any of the others, or the little finger doing something different at the other end of the hand. And if I move the object around, that 5-finger team goes on feeling like a team. I don't push the bottle around with one particular finger. This brings us to an important pedagogical tool, that of using other objects which have easy day-to-day associations, which enable us to simply recognize specific physical knowledge that we need in our playing. Holding a bottle, cup, or any relatively small object is a great reference point for us. It gives us what I call a blueprint sensation. We can go back to it with our knowledge of what is going on and recognize and analyze what that feels like. In other words, we have clear knowledge plus precise sensation. Then we can walk that information over to the instrument. So day-to-day objects allow us to acquire clear physical vocabulary and become familiar with the information away from the strong associations of the instrument. If we use this idea, we can start to also observe the basic alignment of the finger, hand, and forearm unit. You can try this. If you walk around the room and pick up various objects, you will notice that your forearm is always lined up with your hand, regardless of the weight or shape of the object you are holding. We do this instinctively all the time, because it is this basic alignment of the finger, hand, and forearm unit that allows the forearm to lend its support to the fingers and hand, thereby enabling them to hold with ease and within their capacity. When we break this alignment, the fingers have to do more in the holding than they are capable of, and they start to grip, tighten, and stretch. You will feel this immediately if you break this alignment while holding an object. You will notice how difficult it is for the hand and the fingers to hold. So here I am comfortable, and the fingers and hand are at ease. Here, the wrist is broken, and I can feel the tightening in the fingers, and that tension radiates up the arm. The most common fulcrum breaks for the bow arm come from the wrist breaking up and down, or from twisting, which is when the hand moves left and right out of alignment with the forearm. We can also break the basic alignment when one or more of the knuckles in the fingers collapses, very often the top knuckles in the bow hand. Twisting and breaking a fulcrum were in the short presentation about the main causes of pain and injury, and we'll come back to these often. When there is something we do in everyday life, it is helpful to make a study of it and observe all the normal activities we undertake with these principles in action. It's easy to do 24-hour practice paying attention to how we use basic alignment of the finger, hand, and forearm all the time, and how the hand holds as a team as a result of that alignment. If you sit down to eat a meal, you will notice you're holding all kinds of objects with these principles working very easily. Walking around the supermarket, taking objects off shelves is another good place to observe what we do. So now let's take a more detailed look at how the fingers work as a team. Firstly, they are not stretched apart. If you hold your hand comfortably in front of you, and then even to a tiny degree move the fingers sideways apart, you feel tension, not just in the hand, but all the way up the forearm. I can stretch all the fingers apart, or even just one. In all cases, any kind of stretching will create tension. The fingers have a natural distance between them based on the dips between the knuckles. If we make the hand open beyond that, we feel stretched and tight. Equally, if we contract the hand inside the built-in spacing of the knuckles, the fingers feel crowded. This is the same in the air and when holding an object. So here, the hand is slightly stretched apart at that index finger, or it might be the little finger, or even all of them. Equally, when they are crowded, they just feel like a clump. So we need to recognize the built-in distances between the fingers where the hand feels at ease. Another cause of stretching is when we come to the bow with a prefixed hand or a fixated shape in the hand. We need to be aware of an important principle here, that the hand is always opened by the object it goes to hold, not preformed into a shape. In other words, the object informs the hand as to how much to open and not the other way around. Otherwise, we arrive with tension before we've even started. When we hold a bottle, we don't notice any one finger particularly because the fingers don't have an isolated task assigned to them. One of the problems that arises from the bow hold being first finger dominant, with the little finger often being used as a tiny balance mechanism, is that the resulting isolation in the fingers makes the hand pull in two different directions at the same time, creating dual muscular pull. For the hand, this is the equivalent of me holding onto your arm while you try and leave a room. It makes it very difficult and it sounds funny. You can try doing that on the bottle if you like. You can feel the tightness in the hand and the arm immediately, and it makes holding the bottle very arduous. And then if you imagine trying to navigate a complex task while holding in this way, you can see how the arm can start to accumulate problems. But if we allow the hand to hold as a team, you can notice that the fingers always relate towards each other rather than splaying away. A helpful way to rethink the hand when it has had this kind of splay in it is to imagine the relationship across the fingers and the thumb, connecting the little finger and the first finger across the hand. The fingers need to relate to each other in order to work as a 5-finger team. Now we need to understand the role of the fulcrums. We have fulcrums in the knuckles, we have fulcrums in the wrist, in the elbow, and in the shoulder. So just as in our walking analogy, when each fulcrum does its share, no more and no less, we can do things easily. When one fulcrum does too little or too much, there will be a compensation elsewhere. In the case of the knuckles, when they are working, they give the hand its gentle curve. If one collapses, or what we call breaks, another will start to jut out. What you can see here is how these knuckles start to compensate. And then I can feel the tightening because the work is no longer distributed across my 5-finger team. By comparison, when we hold the object, you can notice the easy curved shape of the fingers. So one of the most common collapses in the bow hand is this 3rd and 4th finger, when these knuckles start to fall in. Reconnecting the knuckles is the type of work done in lessons, often working away from the bow. So the next question is, how do we accommodate weight of objects that we are holding? We already discussed the crucial role of the basic finger, hand, and forearm alignment. I suggested you went around the room and picked up various objects, and these will have all weighed different amounts. You may have noticed in passing, but it was not a major consideration. So we can clearly accommodate different weights very easily. So what is going on here that makes this so easy? When I hold a heavy object, my forearm releases a corresponding amount of energy in response, and everything goes on working easily within capacity. In other words, we respond to weight with a proportionate amount of let go or release of energy in the forearm. The arm doesn't tighten. It is a subtle but clear sensation in the forearm. Try picking up 2 objects of different weights. You can feel the arm releasing more or less depending on what is needed. But if instead you try and keep the arm the same from one object to the next, the holding becomes very difficult. So we can understand this is a step further and realize that the basic alignment enables the hand to hold easily because it allows the forearm to lend its support to the hand in direct proportion to the weight of the object being held. This means the fingers can go on holding easily within their capacity. When the alignment is broken, this cannot happen, and the fingers and hand have to work very hard. If we then move for hours this way, we can do serious damage to the fingers, hand, and arm. So how does the forearm know how much let go to use when holding? It is the tactile information provided by the skin, in this case on our fingers. Our ability to feel the object informs the arm at lightning speed how much to hold. So we know if we are squeezing or if we are about to drop something. We've all experienced the challenges of holding something when our hands are cold. We cannot feel and therefore cannot compute what is needed. Likewise, if we are wearing thick gloves, it is hard to feel also. When we come to the bow with tightness and stretching and isolating, which makes us have to hold so tightly, we tend to lose the ability to actually feel the bow with our fingers, and therefore we have lost a major source of important information. We need to really revitalize the tactile capacity of the fingers on the bow so we know what is good holding and what is beyond that. So to summarize so far, we hold the bow the same way we hold any other object. All 5 fingers hold equally with the alignment of the finger hand and forearm unit, so the forearm can lend its support as needed. You can see just from what we've looked at already what a cocktail mix of problems we can get into if we don't understand the ingredients just in this holding mechanism. So let's now walk this information over to the bow. Notice that I'm not doing this with the bow in the air. The bow is mostly supported by the strings when playing and is not being held up by the arm. Learning to wait and play will be dealt with later. I'm going to gently swing my arm up to the bow and let the hand just land. Notice that the bow is informing my hand. I do not have to prefix the hand into a shape, just as with the bottle. Notice the distance between the fingers, the shape of the curve and the fulcrums in the knuckles. You can also see the basic alignment and the tactile sense of touch. You can also do this with the bow resting on a music stand or resting on the strings. So it's helpful to look at some common issues that can get in the way. When the fingers hold too near the tips, the other knuckles will have to tighten. It can be the tiniest amount, but we are off balance. When the fingers hold too deeply, the top knuckles start to collapse. There isn't room for everyone, so the knuckles give way. Now we need to be aware of another fundamental movement to get to the bow: forearm rotation. This is another movement that we use all the time. If I aim my arm at different objects, for example on my face, the forearm is rotating to get there. This is another excellent movement for 24-hour practice. Forearm rotation is an essential movement. It comes from the back of the elbow, and when I'm all lined up, it turns the entire arm in both directions. Notice how it turns the entire finger, hand, and forearm unit while also creating a response in the upper arm. But the engine is always here. We already looked at how we need to maintain basic alignment. Forearm rotation allows us to do this while enabling the arm to hold in all different kinds of places and different objects. When you go to pick up an object or move to get something, your arm assesses how much rotation it needs to get the hand onto that object. We don't even notice we're doing it. In lessons, we spend a lot of time working on forearm rotation, making sure it's completely free and therefore radiates all the way up the arm. But if you relate it to some daily activities, it's quite simple to recognize. Turning a doorknob, opening a door with keys are just 2 good simple examples. So let's look at how this works for the bow. The bow and the instrument are on my left side, and the bow works on a tilt. So there is a fundamental rotation in the arm just to get to the bow. Without this forearm rotation, it's impossible to engage the bow and really hold it, because I cannot bring that necessary alignment any other way to the bow. In daily life, we don't generally misjudge how much rotation to use, but we sometimes do on the bow, and it looks like this. If I overturn, it looks like this. If I'm falling off, it will look like this. You can try doing that on the bottle, and it feels terrible. You feel like you cannot hold it at all. So it is this forearm rotation that maintains the basic alignment and therefore allows the normal holding mechanism to continue to work wherever I go with the bow. You can see this on the violin. If I just place the bow on different strings, you can see how my forearm will turn to get me there and the basic alignment will remain. This introduces another fundamental Taubman-Gelansky principle. If we are comfortable in one place and we want to have that same feeling somewhere else, we have to take the same physical ingredients with us. So if my bow arm feels easy here, then I have to take all those factors with me to make the holding feel the same when I'm over here. It makes no sense to feel good in one place and then expect to feel good in the new place if I don't move all the same pieces with me. Let's move to the thumb. Even though we've already included it in the 5 fingers holding equally, the thumb can have its own set of problems, so needs some special attention. The most common thumb problem is curling. Curling is another of the 5 main causes of injury and pain. We've already mentioned the others: isolating, twisting, and breaking a fulcrum. Curling is when the tip of the fingers, or the thumb, pull in. It looks like this. We can curl one finger, or we can curl several. In the case of the thumb, it develops an outward curl or a kink. This is most often caused by the thumb holding so near the nail that it causes it to pinch the bow rather than to hold it. If you go back to the bottle or the cup, you notice that the thumb actually touches on the fleshy part of the pad. If you move the thumb nearer the nail, you can start to feel it pinch, and the tension begins to radiate up the hand and into the arm. Also problematic is the thumb touching too near the first knuckle. This causes the thumb knuckle to push in and start to lock. Going back to where we instinctively place the thumb, you can see that when the thumb is a member of the 5-finger team, the knuckle has a slightly rounded look, or as we say, the knuckle needs to be present, not locked, straight, or curled. When the thumb curls or locks, it has an effect on the fingers. A curled thumb causes the rest of the fingers to squeeze and tighten. A locked thumb causes the fingers to push out or to thrust away from the bow. But when the thumb holds in the fleshy part of the pad, the knuckle is present and it just feels part of that team, functioning easily without undue strain. If we take this over to the bow, it looks like this. So the thumb's relationship to the hand is also crucial to its ability to be part of the team. As a basic principle, it's important to know that if we want any part of the body to work efficiently, it has to function within a medium range of motion. We have problems whenever we try to work in an extreme range, where things simply cannot function easily. All working parts have their medium and extreme ranges. In addition to the curling, a common problem for the thumb is when its relationship to the rest of the fingers is in an extreme range. The thumb is comfortable sitting behind the first finger, and when the forearm rotates, behind the second finger. But when it starts to go towards the third finger, you can immediately feel the strain down the side of the hand. This is an extreme range for the thumb. So going back to the bow, because the hand needs to hold with 5 fingers equally, the most comfortable place for the thumb to do this, within its medium range, is behind the second finger, but slightly to the first finger side. So in the air it would look like this, and on the bow. One final thumb issue that comes up in its relationship to the other fingers is in the angle with which the thumb is sitting on the bow. We said we need a forearm rotation to get to the bow in order to take the entire finger hand and forearm unit with us. So when I rotate the arm, it puts the thumb slightly on its side. Notice that if my hand and arm are rotated to a certain degree, that includes my thumb. But if my thumb is trying to sit flatter under the bow, it will be pulling the hand and creating a twist in the wrist. The bone on the right starts to get an odd look, and you can feel the torque that it places on the hand and wrist. it also forces the backside of the arm and elbow to have to lift up. So the angle of the thumb is dictated by the forearm rotation, and the thumb always has an easy rotation, an easy relationship towards the fingers. You can see this in the air and on the bow. So now we have all the components of our holding mechanism. 5 fingers holding equally, a fundamental forearm rotation that maintains the basic alignment of the finger, hand, and forearm unit, so the forearm can lend its support to the hand. This is the basic holding mechanism. It's important to state that the only job the hand has is to hold the bow. It is not responsible for tone production and articulation, dynamics, etc. The fingers cannot have those isolated tasks. We will come back to this point, but this is important to clarify as there is much confusion over the role of the hand in playing. But its role is to simply hold the bow with the ingredients we've talked about. So let's get to the string. Getting to the string can be quite a drama. So how do we get to the string at a basic level? Let's go back to the bottle for a moment. When we hold things and put them down on surfaces, which we do all the time, there's no drama. As we said earlier, the bow is basically just another object. What generally happens with the bow is not this, but it looks more like this. You can try that next time you're at dinner with someone and see how they respond. They'll probably ask you what's wrong. It feels silly too. Edna Galansky described it brilliantly when she asked, "Why is the bow going on a voyage?" The answer is that, as we said at the beginning, because the bow is attached to the music and our feelings about the music, if the piece is grand, for example, we think we need a grand voyage to get started. But in reality, nothing happens until I produce tone, and producing tone happens on the string. Getting the bow to the string is a much more mundane affair. It is just like the bottle. The voyage is confusing to the arm, and furthermore, it often becomes tied in with a gasp of air too in our attempt to get the music to breathe. But this just complicates putting the bow on the string even further. It's hard to move accurately and in control from this type of beginning. We are thrown off balance by the gasp of air and the circuitous route we are on. You can try both gasp and voyage on the bottle. If I want to put this bottle on the table, I will wait where I am comfortable, close to my body and close to where I want to be. And then I will go directly to the precise spot I want to put it on. This brings us to an important conceptual issue with the bow. You can ask yourself this question: what is your image of the bow or your concept of the bow? It is often this long object, a long span of white hair, in contrast to our concept of the fingerboard, which has specific notes and fingers. But when we put an object down, we are very precisely aiming at a certain spot. When I put the bottle down, I am not aiming at a vast expanse of table. I go to one precise place. When we put the bow on the string, it has to be the same thought process. We are not putting a vast expanse of white hair on the string. We are putting it down very specifically in one place. In other words, we are putting a specific piece of bow hair onto a specific part of the string. The brain actually cannot compute how to get to the string if I am thinking of this vast long object. It's too vague. We look where we want to go and we send the arm with the object to that spot. This is a very important shift in the thinking. We have to rethink our concept of the bow so it is as precise as the left hand. You can practice waiting comfortably, then looking at the hair, choosing a spot on the string, and then going directly there. The rule is that we go from spot to spot. Our eyes play an important role in this computation. Of course, when it's all working, we can do it with minimal looking or by using various degrees of peripheral vision. But at first, most people really need to look until the concept of bow to string is in place and the direct nature of getting to the string makes sense. The practice of spot to spot and looking is important to work on. It's been very interesting in teaching how the role of looking has come up in so many situations. Playing an instrument that doesn't have keys is hard enough. We have a great deal of information to compute, but then having one of our senses switched off makes it even harder. Looking gives the body information. Try running in the dark. It's very unstable because we cannot compute the movement without seeing. There is even sometimes an element of shame involved in using the eyes for playing, as if this means we are less musical. But looking has many different forms. I can look in a very concentrated way, which we often have to do at the beginning of training, but there is also the considerable scope of peripheral vision, which is hugely important. We are actually using peripheral vision to judge how to do things all the time. When you walk, you are not usually staring at the ground, but you are using peripheral vision. The running in the dark example shows us how important that peripheral vision is. Your peripheral vision enables you to run and walk because it gives the body precise information about where to go. So when we are working at getting to the string, we need to be precise about looking at the exact place on the bow hair we want to place on the exact part of the string and go directly there without a voyage or a gasp of air. It really is just spot to spot. Let's take a look now at the fundamental down. When we land on the string, we feel the bow vertically connecting to the string. This is what we call the down, meaning the fundamental down of being present and alert on that surface. I'm not tight, I'm not pressed into the string, my arm isn't collapsed or holding up, but it is connected and present just as our bodies are when we stand on the ground. Being present to a surface is a very important concept. When you stand in one place, you are present to the ground. It is that feeling of being connected and alert, ready to move, but not collapsed or held up and tight. This is how the bow arm should feel in the fundamental down. When there's been a voyage to get to the string, usually in combination with a deep breath, the bow arm often collapses when it gets to the string. This is an inevitable response to both voyage and gasp. We have to let them go at some point, so instead of being balanced and present and ready to go, the arm collapses on arrival. It is very difficult to move from collapse, and it's not a state from which we can have activity and speed. The fundamental down comes from the forearm and not the fingers. You can see this when I nudge the string. I can feel that string in my forearm and I can sense the connection it has with the string. If you gently move your forearm, you can feel the resistance created by the forearm connecting bow and string. Let's go back to the bottle for a moment. If I put the bottle on the table and I feel that same fundamental down and resistance of bottle to surface, we can see that while there is a response from the fingers, they are not doing the work. They are not the engine. The fingers are responding a tiny amount, but the forearm is doing the work. Try feeling that fundamental down from the fingertips, and you feel the whole hand tighten straight away. Remember that the only job the fingers have is to hold the bow. They cannot be the engine. Of course, they have to respond in the same way our toes respond when we walk, but the toes and fingers are not the source of activity at any point. We'll look at their responsiveness to the forearm further, but this is a fundamental rule. One of the most important aspects of the Taubman work is that it enables us to understand the difference between what makes something happen versus what something looks like externally when it is happening. This is a very important distinction to understand, as it has got us into quite a mess with our playing. What things look like and how they are happening are not the same. What we need to know is what is going on underneath, what enables the body to move in a certain way. This is where the precision of the Taubman knowledge is so important, And when we understand it, we can easily recognize it as making perfect sense inside the body. There is a physical logic to it that we understand. There's another element we need to know that helps us understand putting the bow onto the string. And that is the difference between full holding versus partial holding. When you have the bottle in the air, your finger, hand, and forearm unit is fully holding it. In other words, it is taking all the weight of the bottle. When you put it on the surface, the arm lets go a little bit. It partially holds the bottle, but it is still holding it somewhat. We don't collapse into the table or surface, which then means I can't really move and makes the arm tight. We don't grip the bottle, and we would know immediately if we were gripping it. We feel the surface we landed on, and the arm immediately computes how much less it needs to keep the object there and to move. We are back to the importance of the tactile information. It is the feeling of the surface that tells the arm how much to let go. If I couldn't feel that surface, or it was wobbly and insecure, I would keep hold of the bottle much more. So understanding full holding and partial holding is very important. This means with the bow that there is no need to collapse or to hold up with the bow arm. My arm recognizes the surface and does exactly what is necessary. There is no confusion. This makes starting a great deal simpler. When there is no voyage, just a simple spot-to-spot landing in which the adjustment from full holding to partial holding is easily recognizable. Full holding to partial holding switching is another good 24-hour practice exercise. It's something we do all the time when we put objects down on surfaces. We don't usually slam them down or grip them, and we compute the switch from full to partial holding very easily and with incredible speed through touch. One final point here is that understanding full and partial holding enables us to be clear that we are holding the bow all the time to the amount necessary. We don't let go of it, but we don't need to grip it. This is the beauty of understanding the holding mechanism and the role that each part plays in this process. So let's move on now to moving left and right. It's all great to get to the string, but we do have to move left and right. So let's go back to the bottle. If I put the bottle on the seat pad and move it left and right, you can see the relationship of the forearm moving it and the hand. It is very simply back and forth, left and right. The hand holds and the forearm moves everybody together. If it isn't this, then the holding mechanism is compromised, and then we can get into all kinds of trouble. We must be clear which part is doing what job. Try doing things from the wrist, for example, and it feels very strange. Try moving from the upper arm or the fingers. They all feel wrong. What we do is simply move the forearm back and forth. It is very important to be clear about the relationship of the forearm to the shoulder and the upper arm, which is often a point of much confusion. As we've seen already with what we've discussed so far, the relationships of all the parts in daily life are the same when we play. We cannot employ alien movements at the instrument. You can observe the forearm to upper arm and relationship in daily life, another 24-hour exercise. So the rule is that the forearm is always the initiator of movement, and the upper arm and shoulder follow along in precise proportion and perfectly synchronized. When we do this, we don't even notice the shoulder. But when we initiate from the shoulder, it fatigues immediately. When we initiate from the forearm, the shoulder and upper arm are happy to follow along with whatever activity we are doing. If we don't notice the shoulder when it is correct, it's because it's so easy. It is equally the case that we know when it is wrong because we can feel the shoulder becoming tired, aching, or fatigued. If you walk around the room putting down an object on different surfaces, you will observe how your shoulder follows along happily. If you stop it moving or you try and start from the shoulder, both will feel wrong. So this brings us back to how things look versus what is going on underneath. If I make a large movement with my arm, you will see that the shoulder is responding more visibly. It does not mean that the shoulder became the initiator. It is simply more visible because of the size of the movement. If I make a smaller movement, the shoulder's response is less visible, but the order of the thinking is exactly the same. It is crucial that we understand the difference between how things look and what is going on underneath, so we don't try and change the engine for movement. When I take small steps or large steps, my fundamental walking mechanism is the same. I just changed the size of the step. It's often helpful to take out the down bow, up bow connotations and use left and right or back and forth. Sometimes the down bow and up bow labels have such strong associations that it's difficult to rethink what we are doing. When we realize it is just back and forth, it shows us that they are in fact a reverse of each other. The arm simply goes the other way. Moving an object over a surface does involve changing direction and going the other way, but it does not change the mechanism whereby I move or hold the object. So when we have elaborate wrist movements, most common is the wrist leading the up bow, then not only have I lost the basic alignment that enables me to hold the bow so easily, but I will then need a completely different mechanism in both directions. When you go upstairs or downstairs, it is the same mechanism, but one goes up and one comes down. The fundamental relationships remain the same in the body. When we look at tools for shaping tone production, we will look at tools that create shape in the sound. But at the fundamental level, the arm is simply holding an object, the bow, and moving it back and forth over a surface, the string. So let's show the whole process so far. Here is my holding mechanism. Here I am waiting where I am comfortable and close to where I want to go. And then I will go the shortest route to the instrument and to a specific spot. I can feel the full holding to partial holding, and then moving back and forth as the same mechanism. We need a few more pieces for the basic bow stroke. So how do we deal with the length of the bow? The relationship of the bow arm and the torso is very important. This follows along from the point about the shoulder and upper arm. If I need to hand you something, my torso follows my arms in a proportionate amount, moving over the fulcrum of the feet. It would seem very odd for me to leave my body here and try and hand you something. Equally, when you receive the object, you do the same in return. So just as the hand needs the forearm to lend its support so it can hold easily, the entire arm needs the torso to lend its support to the arm. If I extend my arm without the torso adjusting in the same direction, the arm becomes isolated, at which point nothing will function, and all that is left to make tone and move the bow is my hand stuck out on its own. If I extend my arm without my torso following to take hold of an object, it will feel as if I'm going to drop the object. The hand simply cannot function well. The brain and body are so smart, they know this. So when it happens, the hand picks its only option and tries to press or grip as a substitution for the support that is lacking. This is what happens when the bow arm is extended in a way that isolates it from the torso. The hand starts to grip, the fingers want to tighten and squeeze, all of which causes tremendous pressure on the wrist and radiates tension. On the other hand, if I swing my arm back and forth, it is easy to feel how the torso follows in tiny amounts, moving over the fulcrum of my feet. If I don't move over the fulcrum of the feet, I will twist at the waist, the spine, or the hips. So try just letting the right arm swing from left shoulder down to right thigh, and feel how the torso is following very subtly and moving over the feet. You can try freezing the body and swinging the arm. It's very strange. You can try pulling the opposite way, also strange. So when the bow arm moves, the torso follows in the same direction. So the relationship between torso, arm, and hand is constant. If it is not doing this, then we experience different parts of the bow as feeling very different. The tip feels weak, the frog feels heavy, and the middle something else. Conversely, when we take all the ingredients with us and maintain the relationships, then we feel unity. This means that when I get to the tip, my forearm can continue to lend its support with my torso adjusting over the fulcrum of the feet. And I can connect to the string without pressing. Equally, when I get to the frog, the forearm can accommodate any weight changes needed. I actually don't even notice them. The bow feels the same. It is the same because I've taken the same relationships with me. There is no sense of having to lift the bow out of the string at the frog because it is heavier, or having to press at the tip to make sound. If we're sitting to play, then we are moving over the fulcrum of the sit bones rather than the feet. So the torso has to respond with the motions of the arm in the same direction. This provides us with the information to play equally comfortably on all the strings. We know that if we want to feel the same, we have to take all the same ingredients with us. If I move over the fulcrum of the feet, my torso can adjust, enabling me to feel the same as I move to the other strings. Notice as I do it that in each case, I let the bow arrive on the new string. It settles before it moves, otherwise it will be unstable. If I don't move to the other strings this way, the balance will be completely different. So now we can clarify bow changes. These are often mysterious. Many of us spend years doing the most elaborate things for bow changes, and yet they often remain this elusive, complex activity that always seems just not right. We cannot be in two places at once. I cannot go left and right at the same time or walk forwards and backwards at the same time. If I walk forwards and then walk backwards, there is the tiniest of moments when there is repose in which the muscles subside in order to go the other way. We do this instinctively. Try walking forwards just a few steps and then walking backwards, and you will notice that tiny moment of repose when everything neutralizes, so you can go in the opposite direction. The muscles cannot go in two directions without creating dual muscular pull. So we have to complete each direction and let everything subside in order for the muscles to be able to turn around with ease. It is the same when we move the bottle back and forth over the surface. It is, of course, happening at lightning speed. You can try it if you like with the bottle. Subsiding is like neutral in the car's gears. It's just empty and nothing, ready to go in the new direction. In general, when we first come across this, we have to spend time in this moment. We have to blow open this moment and spend time in the neutral state so we can feel the neutral, and then the arm going the other way. We're particularly bad at doing this in the up bow direction. Yes, we do want continuous sound, and we have tools to create that illusion of continuous sound, but the bow arm is going back and forth. So first we have to obey the laws of movement and recognize and allow the arm to subside. After a while, the arm does it instinctively in the same way it does with the object. It is not a foreign concept to the arm, it is just foreign in relation to the violin and bow, so we just need to spend careful time working at a speed where we can recognize it happening, and then it will happen automatically. When we do this, changing directions is simply going the other way. It is remarkably unelaborate, and because it enables us to maintain all the relationships in the arm, the bow feels like one piece, and we are comfortable throughout. When we don't subside, the arm starts to feel up because the muscles are trying to go in two directions at once. This creates tremendous tension and we lose that fundamental down of the arm being connected to the string. So we need this final piece of subsiding at the bow changes in order for all the other things we've talked about to work properly all the time. One final question is how to address bow straightness. A bit like bow changes, this is always a major concern, but again, there is a simple way to address it that coincides with what we do in everyday circumstances. If I use the seat pad and bottle, you can see that I can steer the object anywhere I like. I can move further forwards, I can move backwards, I can move anywhere on the seat pad. What I'm using is a movement that we call in and out. So in and out refers to the movement from the back of the elbow. It is the same movement that you would use to open and close a drawer. When I steer the object over the surface, I am gently combining certain amounts of in and out according to where I want to go with the left-right movement. Everything will be adjusting with me as I do this so the balance can remain the same. I do not thrust the arm forward away from the body if I want to move more forwards, as this would isolate the hand and arm and cause me to have to press to produce sound. So when we're using the object, we are looking at where we want to go to tell the arm how much in and out to use. This same process applies to the bow. If I want to steer, I need to look. And once that in and out motion has been felt and the corresponding adjustments made, it is easy to steer the bow where we want to go without polluting the fundamental bow stroke or the holding mechanism. So in conclusion, what we can see is that there are many parts in the fundamental bow arm, and that each part needs to be clear about what it is doing, and then how all the parts interact to create the whole. When we think and learn this way, it is much simpler to be diagnostic in the learning. If something goes wrong, or we need to work on one particular part. So in the next bow presentation, we'll look at tone production.